It was not the bread she saved first, and that was what made the billionaire stop watching. Behind the Whole Foods in East Austin, at 10:47 on a Thursday night, Keisha Monroe stood under the white security light of the loading dock with one hand on the dumpster lid, and the other holding a torn grocery bag like shame was something she had already paid for, and could no longer afford. She was 33, black, tired in the shoulders, wearing a faded hotel housekeeping jacket over an old hoodie, jeans damp at the cuffs, and sneakers with the soles beginning to separate near the toes. Her hair was braided back neatly, but a few loose strands had escaped around her face from a day that had started before sunrise and had not yet given her permission to rest. She did not climb into the dumpster. She did not grab blindly. She worked carefully, like someone trained to know the difference between wasted and unsafe. A sealed salad with today's date went into one bag. Bruised apples went into another. A leaking container was left behind. She checked labels, pressed cold packs with 2 fingers, smelled packaging, and wiped rainwater from expiration dates with the sleeve of her jacket. 20 feet away, in a gray Nissan Altima with a cracked passenger mirror, her 7-year-old son Noah sat in the back seat with his backpack on his lap and an allergy medicine box tucked beside him. He watched his mother through the fogged window without asking if they were going home soon. Children who grow up around overdue bills learn not to ask questions that make their mothers choose between truth and comfort. On the second floor, behind tinted glass, Julian Blackwell had been reviewing expansion documents for Blackwell Fresh Holdings, a company built on words like ethical, sustainable, community, and zero waste. He was 46, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Keisha's rent, standing in a private office above a store that smelled like organic coffee and polished wood during the day, watching a woman search through what his company had thrown away at night. His first instinct was to call security. His second was to wonder why she had skipped the bread. There were 2 full bakery bags on top, still dry, still sealed. There were peaches with only small bruises, a container of pasta salad that had not opened, and a carton of eggs with only one cracked shell. Keisha saw all of it. But she reached past the food and pulled out a wet brown paper bag marked pharmacy return. The bag was almost falling apart. She caught it with both hands, held it against her chest, and for the first time that night, fear crossed her face. Julian lowered the phone before dialing. Down below, Keisha opened the bag just enough to look inside. A small white box sat between 2 melting cold packs, unopened, labeled Insulin. She closed the bag quickly, as if the air itself might ruin it, then looked toward her son's car, not with relief but with urgency. That was when Julian realized the woman behind his store was not looking for dinner first. She was saving something his company had thrown away, and whatever it was, it mattered more to her than hunger. Julian did not move for almost 10 seconds. From the second-floor office, the loading dock looked like a scene that did not belong beneath the polished promise of his store. Above the front entrance, customers saw warm lighting, fresh flowers, baskets of organic fruit, and signs printed with words like local, responsible, and community care. But behind the building, under the hard white security light, a tired black mother was standing beside a dumpster, holding a wet pharmacy bag with both hands like it might decide whether someone made it through the night. Julian still had his phone in his palm. The security number was open on the screen 1 tap away. He did not tap it. Down below, Keisha checked the insulin box again, quickly but carefully. She pressed the cold pack against her wrist, looked at the label, then slipped the box into an insulated lunch bag she had brought from the car. The lunch bag was faded blue, the zipper missing its pull tab, replaced with a paper clip. She zipped it halfway, then tucked it under her jacket to keep it from the rain. Only after that did she turn back to the food. She saved the medicine first. Not the bread. Not the fruit. Not the ready-made meals that would have fed her. And her son. The medicine. Julian felt a small discomfort move through him, the kind of discomfort rich men often mistake for curiosity because guilt would require action. He looked toward the security monitor on the wall. The camera feed showed the same woman from 3 angles. Loading dock, back gate, west dumpster. On one screen, her son sat in the Nissan, still and small, his face pale under the yellow dome light. On another, Keisha lifted a sealed carton of strawberries, checked it, and put it into a separate bag. She left behind anything opened, leaking, warm, or questionable. She was not scavenging. She was sorting. That difference bothered him more than desperation would have. Desperation would have been easier to dismiss. A knock came at the office door before Julian could decide what to do. Ray Turner, the night security guard, stepped in, wearing a black rain jacket over his uniform and carrying the uneasy expression of a man who knew the rules but had also lived close enough to hard times to understand when rules were missing something human. "Mr. Blackwell," Ray said, "we have someone at the dock again." Julian did not look away from the window. "Again?" Ray hesitated. "Yes, sir. You know her. Not personally. But you know who she is." Ray shifted his weight. "Her name is Keisha Monroe. She used to work inventory here." That made Julian turn. "Here?" "Yes, sir. Evening shift. A few years back." "And she has been coming here since?" "Not every night. Mostly Thursdays." "Why Thursdays?" Ray looked toward the monitors as if the answer were sitting there waiting for permission. "That is when the prepared foods and pharmacy partner returns get cleared before weekend inventory." Julian's eyes narrowed. "You are telling me she knows our disposal schedule. She used to help run it." Before Julian could ask more, another voice entered from the hall. "She is a repeat trespasser, Ray, not a charity case." Heather Collins walked into the office with her tablet pressed against her chest. She was the store manager, late 40s, polished, efficient, the kind of person who could smile through a complaint and make it sound like policy had feelings. Her hair was pulled into a tight blonde bun, and her green Whole Foods jacket looked freshly steamed even this late at night. "Mr. Blackwell, I am sorry you had to see this. We have had issues with her before." Julian looked back through the glass. Keisha was now pulling a sealed loaf of bread from the top of the bin, inspecting the plastic for holes. "What kind of issues?" Heather's mouth tightened. "Unauthorized product removal. Loitering. Interference with disposal procedures." Ray's jaw moved slightly, but he said nothing. Julian saw it. "You disagree?" Ray looked at Heather, then at Julian. "She never touches sellable merchandise. Not from the floor, not from the loading carts, not from donation bins. Only what has already been thrown out." Heather gave a short, controlled laugh. "That distinction does not matter legally. It matters morally," Ray said before he could stop himself. The room went still. Heather stared at him. Ray looked down, but he did not take the words back. Julian placed his phone on the desk. "Why was insulin in the trash?" Heather blinked once. "Excuse me." She pulled insulin from a pharmacy return bag. Heather stepped closer to the window, then looked at her tablet. "That is handled by the pharmacy partner. If it was in our disposal area, it was marked for waste. Was it expired? I would need to check. Was it unsafe? Again, I would need to check." Julian watched Keisha place the insulated bag carefully in the back seat beside her son. Noah looked up at her, and she touched his cheek through the open car door with the back of her fingers. It was a quick gesture, tender but restrained, the kind a mother gives when she has no time to fall apart. Then she returned to the dumpster, not to fill her own arms first, but to pull a folded paper from her jacket pocket and compare it to the food in the bin. A list. Julian could see the paper from above, damp at the edges, names written in rows. "What is that list?" he asked. Heather's answer came too fast. "Probably excuses," Ray said quietly. "It is for a shelter." Julian turned again. "What shelter?" "Brooks House," Ray said. "Youth shelter off East 12th. Heather cut in. "Ray, you do not know that officially. I have seen the paper. You should have reported that." "I did." Heather went silent for half a beat, just long enough to reveal that the report had not gone where it should have. Julian looked from one employee to the other. In boardrooms, people lied with charts. In stores, they lied with pauses. Down below, Keisha suddenly looked up. Maybe she felt watched. Maybe she saw movement behind the glass. Her hand tightened around the torn grocery bag, and for a moment she seemed ready to leave everything except the insulated lunch bag. Heather saw the movement and reached for the office phone. "I will have her removed." "No," Julian said. Heather froze. "Mr. Blackwell, our policy is clear." "Then tonight I want to see what our policy has been hiding." He walked past her toward the stairs. Ray followed immediately. Heather followed too, but her steps were sharper now, no longer polished. By the time Julian reached the loading dock, rain had started again, light but cold. Keisha stood beside the dumpster with the wet list in one hand and a bag of salvaged groceries in the other. Noah watched from the Nissan, his small face half hidden by fogged glass. Ray stopped near the dock door. Heather stepped forward as if authority belonged to whoever arrived angriest. "Keisha, you need to leave now." Keisha did not flinch. She looked at Heather, then at Julian, recognizing money before she knew his name. "I am leaving." "With stolen property," Heather said. Keisha lifted the bag slightly. "You threw it away. That does not make it yours. It does not make it less useful." Julian studied her face. There was fear there but not guilt. There was exhaustion but not surrender. "Why did you take the pharmacy bag first?" he asked. Keisha's eyes moved to him, cautious and sharp. "Because it was going to spoil while you all decided whether wasting it was legal enough." "Who is it for?" Heather stepped in. "She does not need to answer that." Keisha looked at Heather with a tired sadness that made Julian feel as if he had entered the last page of a story everyone else had been reading for years. "You would like that, would you not?" Then she looked back at Julian. "It is for a child at Brooks' house who needs it cold. Your store was about to let it sit in trash until morning." Julian felt the loading dock lights hum overhead. "And the food." Keisha held up the list. The paper trembled slightly, not because she was weak, but because she was cold and trying not to show it. "Friday pantry. 8 kids staying through the weekend. 2 cannot have peanuts. 1 needs soft food after dental surgery. 1 is diabetic. 3 have not had a real dinner since Tuesday." Noah coughed softly inside the car. Keisha turned toward him instinctively, and that one glance told Julian more than any report. Her own child was waiting, her own bills were probably late, her own refrigerator might have been empty, and still the first names on that list were not hers. Julian looked at the bags by her feet, the insulated lunch bag in the back seat, the wet dumpster, the slogan painted on the dock wall behind them. "Fresh food. Fresh hope. Zero waste." For the first time, the words did not look like branding. They looked like a witness. Keisha tucked the list back into her pocket. "If you are going to call the police, call them," she said. "But do it after I get this medicine where it needs to go." Heather opened her mouth. Julian raised one hand and she stopped. He looked at Keisha, then at the dumpster, then at the store he owned. "No one is calling the police," he said. Keisha did not relax. "That is not the same as letting me leave." Julian knew she was right. Power often announced mercy while still blocking the door. He stepped aside. "Then leave." "But I am coming with you." Keisha's eyes narrowed. "No, to the shelter." "No, why?" She lifted her chin. "Because people like you do not visit hungry children unless a camera gets there first." Ray looked away. Heather's face flushed. Julian felt the words land exactly where they were meant to. Down the loading dock, Noah pressed one hand against the car window, watching his mother stand between a billionaire and a trash bin with a bag of insulin under her jacket. And Julian Blackwell, who had built an empire selling kindness in clean aisles under warm lights, suddenly understood that this woman did not owe him trust just because he had paused before doing the wrong thing. The morning before Julian Blackwell saw Keisha Monroe behind the loading dock, she had woken up at 4:38 to the sound of her phone alarm vibrating against a cracked plastic nightstand. She always set it to vibrate first because the apartment walls were thin, and Noah slept lightly when his allergies were bad. The room was still dark, except for the blue numbers on the microwave across the narrow kitchen, and the orange streetlight leaking through blinds that had lost 3 slats before they ever moved in. Keisha sat up slowly, not because she had slept enough, but because the day had already begun charging her interest. Her feet touched the cold floor. She reached for the hoodie folded at the end of the bed, pulled it over the t-shirt she had slept in, and listened for Noah. One soft breath. Then another. Good. Breathing had become the first thing she checked every morning, before money, before weather, before her own body. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom for Noah, 1 pull-out couch for Keisha, a kitchen with cabinets that did not close all the way, and a bathroom sink that ran brown for 3 seconds before the water cleared. It was not filthy. Keisha did not allow that. Poverty could crowd a room, but she refused to let it stink. The counters were wiped. The dishes were stacked. Noah's school shoes sat by the door with the laces tucked inside so he would not trip. His backpack leaned against the chair with 2 folders, a library book, and the allergy medicine box she had bought by choosing not to fill her own gas tank all the way. On the kitchen table lay the Friday pantry list for Brooks House Youth Shelter. Folded once, then unfolded, then folded again because Keisha had read it too many times.
Malik, no peanuts.
Tasha, soft foods.
Brianne, no dairy.
Eli, insulin must remain cold. 8 children total. 8 names in blue ink, each one written carefully by Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, who ran the shelter with a voice that could comfort a child and shame a city councilman in the same sentence. Keisha touched the paper with 2 fingers, then moved it aside to count the money. Beneath it, $19 in cash, $4.78 in coins, $36 left on a prepaid debit card after the electric company took a partial payment at midnight. Rent was due in 4 days. Gas was just above empty. Her phone bill had a red warning on the account page. The refrigerator hummed behind her, trying to sound fuller than it was. Inside were half a carton of orange juice, 3 eggs, a small container of rice, 2 slices of cheese wrapped in wax paper, and a jar of pickles Noah liked more than he admitted. Keisha took out 1 egg and put the other 2 back. She scrambled it with a little rice, added salt, and divided it into 2 portions that made no mathematical sense unless you understood motherhood. Noah's portion went on the blue plate. Hers went into a coffee mug so it would look like she had already eaten more than she had. At 5:06, Noah appeared in the doorway wearing pajama pants and a school shirt because he had fallen asleep before changing all the way. He was 7, small for his age, with deep brown skin, thoughtful eyes, and braids Keisha had redone the night before while he sat between her knees watching cartoons with the volume low. 2 braids near the back had already loosened because he slept like he was wrestling the pillow. "Morning, Mama," he whispered. "Morning, Professor." He smiled at that. She called him Professor because he asked questions about everything. Why bread got mold, why rich people threw away food, why his mother knew how to read labels faster than the scanners at stores, why some children had lunch boxes with superheroes and some had grocery bags with their names written in marker. Keisha slid the blue plate toward him. "Eat slow. Drink water after." Noah looked at her mug. "You eating too?" "Already started." He studied her face, then nodded because children in homes like theirs learned when not to challenge a lie told with love. Keisha hated that he knew. She hated more that knowing made him gentle. After breakfast, she packed his lunch. Cheese between 2 pieces of bread from the discount rack, apple slices from an apple with 1 bruised side cut away, and a small note folded into the napkin. "You are not a burden. You are my blessing." She wrote that often because the world charged children for being poor before they had words for bills. By 5:48, they were in the Nissan Altima, a gray 2008 model with a cracked passenger mirror, 1 window that needed help rolling up, and a trunk that held more of Keisha's life than any closet ever had. There was a hotel uniform on a hanger, a delivery bag, a roll of trash bags, 2 pairs of gloves, a small cooler with a broken handle, and 3 reusable grocery bags labeled with marker. Safe, check, shelter. She had not always sorted her life into bags. That started after Whole Foods. Before that, she had sorted inventory under bright lights for 10 hours at a time and believed careful work could protect careful people. She dropped Noah at school before sunrise care, walked him to the door, and watched him turn back once. He always turned back once. She lifted her hand. He lifted his, then went inside with the other early children whose parents worked jobs that began before the city admitted the day had started. At 6:22, Keisha arrived at the hotel near downtown Austin where she cleaned rooms until 2 in the afternoon. The lobby smelled like citrus water, new carpet, and money passing through without staying. Guests rolled suitcases past her without seeing her face. She wore a name tag that said K. Monroe and carried a cleaning cart stocked with tiny shampoos, towels folded into soft white squares, and sheets that cost more than the blanket on her own bed. In room 904, someone had left half a fruit tray untouched, grapes still firm, strawberries clean, melon sealed under plastic. Hotel policy said staff could not take guest leftovers. Keisha threw it away because she needed the job. The sound of good food dropping into a trash bag still made her stomach tighten. Not because she wanted it for herself. Because she knew 8 names on a folded paper that would have eaten it. In room 1112, she found unopened bottled water beside the bed and 2 granola bars still sealed on the desk. Those were hotel stock, not guest food, and the supervisor had told them last month anything left from welcome baskets had to be returned to storage. Keisha returned them. She had learned the difference between need and risk. Need was constant. Risk had paperwork. During her 10-minute break, she sat near the employee entrance and called Brooke's house. Mrs. Evelyn answered on the second ring. "You breathing today, baby?" Keisha smiled despite herself. "Barely, but yes. That counts." Keisha looked at the list in her lap. "Eli still needs cold storage tonight?" Mrs. Evelyn's voice lowered. "Yes. Clinic had a delay. We are trying to bridge until morning." "What time?" "Before midnight if possible." Keisha closed her eyes. "I will see what I can do." "Keisha." The older woman's voice softened. "You are not responsible for fixing everybody's empty shelves." Keisha looked across the service lot where hotel trash bins overflowed with breakfast nobody had finished. "No. But I know where some shelves get emptied on purpose." After the hotel shift, Keisha picked up Noah from school, listened to him tell her about a science worksheet on plants, and drove to the discount pharmacy. His allergy medicine refill cost more than the app had said it would. The coupon did not apply because the bottle size had changed. Keisha asked the cashier to try again. The cashier did, with the expression of someone who had done this too many times to be cruel but not enough times to be kind. Keisha paid with the prepaid card, then $5 in cash, then coins. Noah stood beside her, staring at a rack of toy cars and pretending not to hear the total. When they got back into the Nissan, he said, "I can use less medicine." Keisha turned in the driver's seat so fast the old seatbelt locked against her shoulder. "No, sir." He looked down. She softened her voice. "You do not make yourself smaller so a bill feels lighter." He nodded, but his eyes stayed on his shoes. She drove delivery orders from 4:30 until 9:15. Burgers to a student apartment. Thai food to a condominium with a lobby guard. 2 vegan grain bowls to a house where the customer tipped $1 and left instructions not to ring the bell. Noah sat in the back with homework on his lap, reading by the dome light when the car was parked. Keisha hated having him there. She hated the way he knew which restaurants gave drivers water, and which ones made them wait outside. But childcare cost more than the shift made, and the world loved telling mothers to work without making any place for their children to exist while they did. At 9:28, she filled the gas tank with $8 and watched the needle move just enough to keep hope technical. At 9:41, she pulled into the parking lot behind a closed laundromat and changed out of her hotel jacket into the old hoodie. Noah looked up from his book. "Are we going to the store?" Keisha did not like lying to him, so she chose the version of truth he could carry. "We are making a pickup. For Brooke's house." She looked at him in the mirror. "Maybe." He nodded with a seriousness that made him look older than 7. "The kids with the weekend list." "Yes. Can I help?" "Your job is to stay in the car, keep the doors locked, and if anybody scares you, press the horn." "That is not helping." "That is helping me stay calm." He accepted that because he loved her. 10 minutes later, she parked near the Whole Foods loading dock, far enough from the camera to feel less watched, close enough to move quickly if she found something cold. She knew the schedule because she had built part of it. Thursday night disposal after inventory reconciliation. Prepared foods pulled at 10:15. Bakery at 10:30. Pharmacy partner returns often placed near the rear bin before courier pickup if someone was careless, and people were careless when a system taught them that anything behind the building had already stopped matching. Keisha put on gloves with a tear near the thumb. She took the small cooler, the safe bag, the check bag, and the shelter list. Before stepping out, she looked back at Noah. His face was lit by the weak dome light. Eyes steady, mouth set in the same determined line she saw in her own reflection when money got tight. "Mama," he said, "are you stealing?" The question landed gently, which made it hurt more. Keisha turned fully toward him. "No. But it is in the trash. That is why I am careful." "Then why do we have to hide?" She looked toward the store. The clean glass front, the warm aisles, the signs about responsibility printed large enough for shoppers to feel good beneath them. Because some people would rather throw something away than watch someone poor use it. Noah thought about that. That is not smart. Keisha smiled sadly. "No, professor. It is not." She stepped into the cold light of the loading dock and lifted the dumpster lid. The smell was not as bad as people imagine because most of what stores wasted was not rotten. That was the part that made her angry. Good bread. Sealed greens. Slightly bruised fruit. Yogurt one day from the printed date. Prepared meals pulled for appearance, not safety. She moved the way she had moved when the store paid her. Careful, trained, precise. Safe. Check. Leave. Safe. Check. Leave. She was not there to take dignity from the trash. She was there because dignity had already been thrown there by someone else. Then her hand touched the wet brown pharmacy return bag. The paper sagged. The cold pack inside was still cool. She saw the label through the tear. Insulin. Her breath caught. Not for Noah. Not for her. Ellie. Brooke's house. Cold storage before midnight. For 1 second, the world narrowed to that white box and the ticking clock inside it. Keisha pulled the bag free and held it against her chest. She did not know Julian Blackwell was watching from above. She did not know Ray Turner was on his way to the office. She did not know Heather Collins would soon call her a problem again. She only knew that a child she had never given birth to needed something a rich store had decided was waste, and a mother who had almost nothing had found it first. Julian Blackwell had built an empire by selling people the feeling that buying food could also make them feel clean. His stores smelled like fresh basil, roasted coffee, polished wood, and moral confidence. They had wide aisles, soft lighting, hand-painted signs, and employees trained to say words like locally sourced, responsibly raised, low-waste, and community partner with the calm warmth of people who had never been asked to explain why yesterday's soup could not become tonight's dinner for a child with no dinner at all. At 46, Julian was one of the most admired black entrepreneurs in American food retail. Business magazines called him the man who made ethical grocery profitable. Universities invited him to speak about conscious capitalism. City leaders wanted him at ribbon cuttings because he looked good beside the future they were trying to sell. Tall, composed, deep brown skin, close-cropped hair, tailored charcoal suits, quiet eyes that made investors feel he had already seen the problem and solved it. His watch was understated and expensive. His shoes were Italian. His public smile was warm enough for cameras and controlled enough for boardrooms. He had learned early that rich people were allowed to care about poverty, as long as they never seemed personally disturbed by it. Disturbance made donors uncomfortable. Strategy made them applaud. Julian's office above the East Austin Whole Foods had been prepared for him that evening like a private observation deck. A walnut table. Bottled mineral water. A fruit tray no one had touched. A wall monitor showing expansion maps across Austin neighborhoods where rent was rising faster than wages. East Austin, South Congress, Riverside, Pflugerville, Round Rock. Each possible location marked with a green dot, each dot attached to projections about household income, foot traffic, brand penetration, and community reception. On paper it looked generous. Premium food access. Urban revitalization. Healthy options in underserved corridors. But the numbers Julian had been reviewing at 10:30 that night were not about hunger. They were about capture. If Blackwell Fresh Holdings secured the next phase, his company would control grocery development in neighborhoods where smaller stores, corner markets, and informal food networks had served families long before investors discovered the word opportunity. Julian had not always been this distant from the people in his reports. He grew up outside New Orleans with a mother who could stretch a pot of red beans across 3 days and make it taste like abundance on the first night, patience on the second, and imagination on the third. His father left when Julian was 9, not in a dramatic scene, but slowly with missed calls, late checks, and promises that became weathered by repetition. His mother, Denise Blackwell, cleaned offices at night and worked a cafeteria line during the day. She believed no child should be ashamed of being hungry, so she packed Julian's lunch in foil and told him food made with care was richer than food bought with pride. He believed her until middle school, when another boy held up his foil-wrapped beans and asked if his mother had packed leftovers from a trash can. Julian did not fight him. He threw the lunch away. That was the first time he remembered choosing image over hunger. His mother never scolded him when she found out. She only said, "Baby, one day you will learn that shame wastes more than food." Julian carried that sentence for years, then buried it under ambition. By 32, he owned 3 specialty grocery stores. By 38, He had acquired a regional organic chain. By 46, Blackwell Fresh Holdings owned or controlled more than 80 premium markets, several prepared food kitchens, a distribution company, and minority stakes in wellness brands that sold $10 juices to people who loved the idea of health packaged beautifully. His company donated loudly. Holiday food drives, hunger awareness campaigns, branded reusable bags where $1 went to a partner nonprofit, a zero-waste pledge printed in annual reports. Julian liked those pages. They made him feel that he had outrun the boy who threw away his mother's lunch. But he rarely visited loading docks. Loading docks were where language ended and choices showed up in plastic bags. That Thursday night, he had come to the East Austin store because the location mattered. Community activists had been pushing back against his expansion, accusing Blackwell Fresh of raising rents, pricing out local grocers, and treating food insecurity like a marketing opportunity. Julian had dismissed most of it as resistance to change. He was not a landlord, he told himself. He was not the city council. He was not the reason wages were low. He was bringing better food options to neighborhoods that deserved them. That was the line he used in interviews, and it worked because it sounded true from a stage. Inside the office, Heather Collins had given him a clean store tour at 8:15. Produce looked perfect. Bakery shelves were abundant. Prepared meals were arranged in neat rows. The donation board near the entrance listed local partners, though Julian noticed Brooks House Youth Shelter was not on it anymore. Heather explained that smaller partners sometimes failed compliance review. Julian nodded because compliance was a word designed to make refusal sound responsible. Ray Turner had stood near the front entrance during the tour, quiet, professional, eyes following Heather whenever waste procedures came up. Julian noticed that too, then forgot it because men with full calendars often confuse noticing with caring. At 9:50 the store closed. Employees began their routines. Registers counted. Floors cleaned. Shelves faced. Prepared foods pulled. Julian stayed upstairs to review the final expansion packet while Heather finished end-of-day reports. The document on his tablet said community food recovery had improved 7% across the region. Another page said shrink loss was down. Another said waste diversion goals were on track. Green arrows. Clean margins. Good optics. The kind of report a chief executive officer could show a board and feel righteous. Then movement below the window caught his eye. A woman at the dumpster. At first, Julian felt irritation before concern, the reflex of ownership. His building. His policy. His liability. His brand. He reached for the phone not because he was cruel, but because the company had trained him to respond to disorder as risk. But then Keisha reached past the bread. The detail was small enough that a distracted man would have missed it, and Julian had spent years becoming a distracted man in expensive rooms. She did not move like someone grabbing whatever she could. She moved like someone reading consequences. Safe bag. Check bag. Leave behind. Cold pack. Label. List. Purpose. It unsettled him because it looked like work. Not theft. Work. He watched her put food into categories with the precision of an employee following a better policy than the one his store enforced. When she lifted the pharmacy return bag and pressed it to her chest, Julian thought of his mother's foil-wrapped lunch in a school trash can. The memory came so sharply he almost stepped back from the glass. Shame wastes more than food. Behind him the office still looked perfect. The fruit tray sat untouched. The bottled water sweated lightly on the walnut table. The expansion packet glowed on the tablet with phrases like neighborhood integration and ethical growth. Down below, a mother with old gloves and tired shoulders was rescuing insulin from the trash before rescuing bread. Julian did not yet know about Eli at Brooks' house. He did not yet know about the emails Keisha had sent, the logs Heather had buried, the policies that made employees afraid to donate what was safe. He did not yet know that the woman below had once worked inside the system he praised on stages. But he felt, before he understood, that something was wrong in a way public relations could not repair. When Ray entered and said she had been there before, Julian heard more than a security report. He heard a pattern. When Heather called her a repeat trespasser, he heard language closing a door before truth could walk through it. And when Keisha looked up from the loading dock with the insulated bag hidden under her jacket, Julian realized she was not the only one being watched. His store was watching him too. Every slogan on the wall, every zero-waste promise, every donation photo, every speech he had ever given about dignity and access seemed to turn toward that window and ask one question he had avoided for years. What does kindness mean when it only exists where customers can see it? Julian reached the loading dock before he knew what he was going to say, and that bothered him because he was a man who almost never entered a conversation unprepared. Preparation was how he controlled rooms. Preparation was how he turned worry into strategy and strategy into applause. But there, behind the East Austin Whole Foods, under the cold security lights and the smell of wet cardboard, spoiled flowers, diesel from delivery trucks, and good food sealed in plastic bags that had no reason to be. Trash preparation left him. Keisha stood 10 feet away with the insulated lunch bag pressed beneath her jacket and the grocery bags at her feet. Rain dotted the shoulders of her faded hoodie. Her hotel housekeeping jacket was still visible underneath, the name tag half hidden but not enough. K. Monroe. Her eyes moved from Julian to Heather to Ray, then back to Julian again, measuring not who looked powerful but who looked dangerous. Noah sat inside the gray Nissan with both hands around his backpack straps, watching through a window fogged from his own breathing. He did not wave. He did not cry. He looked like a child who had learned that adults in uniforms and adults in suits could both change a night without asking permission. Heather stepped ahead of Julian as if the loading dock belonged to her personally. Keisha, this has gone far enough. Keisha did not answer right away. She bent down, tied the top of one grocery bag, and moved it behind her with her foot, not to hide it, but to protect it from the rain. Julian saw the motion. Even under pressure, even while being confronted, she was still thinking about whether the food stayed dry. Heather saw only defiance. You are on private property after hours, Heather continued. You have been warned before. Keisha straightened slowly. You mean I have been threatened before? I mean exactly what I said. Ray stood near the dock door, uncomfortable, one hand resting near his radio but not touching it. Julian noticed his hesitation. A good security guard following bad policy had the look of a man holding a door closed while wishing someone else would open it. Julian turned to Keisha. Miss Monroe. Her expression tightened when he used her name. Ray told you. Yes. Then Ray also told you I used to work here. Heather cut in. That is irrelevant. Keisha looked at Heather, and the tiredness in her face changed into something sharper. It was relevant when you needed someone to fix your inventory mess every Thursday night. Heather's jaw tightened. You were terminated for cause. I was terminated for noticing too much. Julian raised one hand, not to silence Keisha, but to stop Heather from stepping over. The answer. I want to understand what you were taking. Keisha gave a short laugh with no humor in it. Taking. She looked down at the bags beside her. That word does a lot of work for people who throw things away. What would you call it? Julian asked. Recovering. For whom? Her eyes held his. For children who do not shop in your aisles. Heather folded her arms. This is exactly the kind of emotional manipulation she uses. Keisha's head turned slowly. You want emotional manipulation? Go walk past the bakery case at 9 in the morning when everything smells like butter and cinnamon. Then explain to a hungry child why perfectly good bread has to be locked behind a price tag until it becomes trash at night. The words did not come out loud. They came out clean. Ray looked down at the wet concrete. Julian looked toward the dumpster and saw what he had not let himself see from above. Sealed bakery bags, bruised but edible fruit, prepared meals pulled from the shelf because the date on the label had reached the edge of policy, not safety. He had read waste reports for years. Percentages. Recovery rates, donation partnerships, diversion goals. None of them had smelled like this alley. None of them had a child in a Nissan watching his mother hold her dignity together with wet gloves and an old lunch bag. Why did you not use an official donation channel? Julian asked. He meant it as a question. Heather heard it as support. Exactly. Keisha looked at him like he had asked why a locked door had not opened itself. Because your official channel does not go where the hunger is. We partner with approved organizations, Heather said. Approved by who? Keisha asked. People who can fill out 16 pages before a kid needs dinner? Heather's face flushed. There are liability standards. Keisha nodded once. There it is. Liability. The word people use when they want to make doing nothing sound responsible. Julian felt the sentence strike something behind his ribs. He had used that word in boardrooms with complete confidence. Liability, risk, compliance, disposal protocol. Words that turn choices into weather. "What is in the insulated bag?" he asked. Keisha's hand moved instinctively over her jacket. "Medicine that needs to stay cold. For your son." Her face changed, and that was the moment Julian knew the answer was no. It was not shame. It was protection. "Noah has allergies," she said carefully. "This is not his." Heather made a frustrated sound. "Mr. Blackwell, we cannot stand in the rain debating personal stories. The item was in a disposal area. It may be compromised." Keisha turned on her. "Then why was it in a paper bag with melting cold packs instead of logged for medical return?" Heather froze. It was brief, but Julian saw it. Ray saw it too. Keisha continued. "Why was the pharmacy partner return sitting beside produce waste? Why was there no red tag? Why was it not in the locked cooler? Why did the label show it still had temperature time left when I found it?" Julian looked at Heather. "Answer her." Heather's mouth opened, then closed. "I would need to check the chain of custody report." "Do that," Julian said. "Now." Heather did not move. "Mr. Blackwell, with respect, this is not a conversation to conduct with a former employee who has an agenda." Keisha smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came from having been called difficult by people who made difficulty necessary. "My agenda is 8 kids eating this weekend." Noah coughed inside the Nissan. It was soft, but Keisha heard it as if nothing else existed. She turned immediately, stepping toward the car. Heather moved as if to block her path, perhaps only out of habit, perhaps because power sometimes forgets when to stand down. Keisha stopped before contact, but Julian saw her whole body go still. Her voice dropped. "Do not get between me and my child." Heather's confidence faltered. Ray stepped forward now, quietly but firmly, placing himself at an angle that opened the path rather than closed it. Keisha went to the Nissan, opened the back door and leaned inside. "You okay, baby?" Noah nodded, embarrassed by all the eyes. "I am okay." "Sip some water." He obeyed. She brushed her fingers over his forehead, checked his breathing, then looked at the medicine box on the seat beside him. Julian watched this small ritual and understood that every part of her night was a calculation. The child in front of her, the children on the list, the medicine under her jacket, the food by the dumpster, the people with authority, the rain, the clock. When she returned, the loading dock felt different. Not kinder, just less able to pretend. Julian pointed to the bags. "Show me what you recovered." Keisha hesitated. "So you can take it back?" "So I can see what my store threw away." "You own the store?" Heather said quickly. "Mr. Blackwell is the founder and chief executive officer of Blackwell Fresh Holdings." Keisha looked at Julian again. Something like understanding passed through her face, then disappointment, as if the person responsible had finally taken human shape and it was smaller than the damage. "Then you own the trash too." Julian accepted that because it was true. Keisha crouched and opened the first bag. Sealed bread. Still dry. Pulled tonight. She opened another. Apples. Bruised, not rotten. Cut around the bad spots and they are fine. Another. Prepared rice bowls. Cold when I found them. Need to be used by tomorrow afternoon. She lifted a small carton. Eggs. 1 cracked. 11 good. She did not speak like someone defending herself. She spoke like an inventory clerk reporting facts. Precise. Trained. Unemotional enough to be believed, if the room had wanted to believe her. Julian looked at Ray. "Is this how she usually does it?" Ray nodded. "Yes, sir. She checks everything. Leaves anything open, warm, leaking, or past safe handling. I have seen her put things back that other people would have taken." Heather shot him a look. "You should have documented that." Ray met her eyes. "I did. Twice." Julian turned to Heather. "Where are those reports?" "I am not sure which reports he means." Ray said. "The ones I sent after you told me to start locking the west dumpster." Keisha looked at him sharply. "You sent reports?" Ray nodded once, ashamed. "I tried." The rain fell harder for a moment, tapping on the metal awning above them. Julian suddenly saw the outline of a hidden system, not from documents but from the way people were standing. Keisha with bags of discarded food and guarded truth. Ray with reports that disappeared. Heather with polished policy language and too many fast answers. Noah behind glass. Himself in a cashmere coat at a dumpster he owned but had never understood. Why Brooks' house? Julian asked. Keisha's face softened despite herself. Because Mrs. Evelyn never turns a kid away for not having paperwork. And you take food there every Thursday? When it is safe. Without being asked? Hungry children do not need to ask beautifully to deserve dinner. Julian looked at her for a long second. You could have taken the bread first for yourself. Keisha's eyes hardened. You do not know what I take home. That is not what I meant. Yes, it is. You are trying to understand why I did not act the way you expect poor people to act. The words hit him directly, and this time he did not look away. Maybe I am. Keisha stepped closer, rain shining on her cheeks but not softening her voice. Poor does not mean selfish. Poor means the math is meaner. That is all. Heather crossed her arms tighter. This is becoming inappropriate. No, Julian said quietly. It is becoming specific. He turned to the dock wall where the company slogan was painted in green letters beneath the security light. Fresh food. Fresh hope. Zero waste. The words looked absurd behind a dumpster full of sealed bread. Heather, open the waste log for tonight. Now. Now. Mr. Blackwell, we have end-of-day protocols. And I want to see them. Heather took out her tablet with visible reluctance. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. Keisha watched every motion, and Julian noticed that she already knew which menu Heather was avoiding. Prepared foods, Keisha said. Heather did not look up. I know how to use my own system. Then use it honestly. Heather's eyes snapped up. You lost the right to lecture this store when you violated policy. I lost my job because I asked why donation bins were emptier than the dumpsters. Silence. There it was. Not the whole truth but enough of it to change the shape of the night. Julian turned fully toward her. You work donation processing? Inventory, Keisha said. Evening shift. And you raised concerns? Heather cut in. She created confusion around disposal classification. Keisha looked at Julian. That means I took pictures of food marked destroyed that should have gone to shelters. Do those pictures exist? Julian asked. Heather said. Mr. Blackwell. Keisha said. Some do. Julian held Heather's gaze. Open the logs. Heather opened them. The screen glowed pale against her face. Julian stepped closer. Items scrolled by. Bakery disposal, prepared foods disposal, produce shrink, pharmacy partner return, non-saleable, destroyed. The numbers were neat. Too neat. The donation column was almost empty. Why are donations this low? Julian asked. Heather's answer arrived ready. Partner pickup inconsistency. Liability concerns. Temperature control limitations. Staffing shortages. Keisha laughed once. You forgot image control. Julian looked at her. What does that mean? Keisha pointed toward the dumpster. It means a store would rather destroy a label than let somebody see how much good food gets wasted after selling kindness all day. Heather's voice sharpened. Enough. No, Julian said. Not enough. He looked at Keisha. What would you do with this food tonight? Take it to Brooks' house. Mrs. Evelyn checks it again. Anything questionable gets tossed. Anything safe goes into weekend meals. And the insulin? Keisha's hand returned to the insulated bag. It needs to leave now. Julian took out his phone. Give me the address. Keisha did not move. Why? Because I will have a refrigerated courier take it. No, it is faster. No, her refusal surprised him. Why not? Because if it leaves my hands and disappears into your system, I do not know if Eli gets it. I know Mrs. Evelyn. I know the cooler at Brooks' house. I know the kid's name. Your system is the reason it was in the trash. Ray looked at Julian as if waiting to see whether that truth would be punished. Julian put the phone away slowly. Then you take it. Heather stepped in. Mr. Blackwell, that is not advisable. Julian did not look at her. Ray, document the items and let her leave. Ray nodded. Relief crossed his face. Keisha gathered the bags but kept her eyes on Julian. Do not stand here and feel good because you let me leave once. Julian said nothing. Tomorrow night another bag goes in. Next Thursday more bread. Next month some other mother gets called a thief for touching what you all wasted. If this only changes because you watched me, then it did not change. Julian felt the loading dock, the rain, the slogan, the bags of recovered food, and the boy in the car gather into a single accusation. What do you want? He asked. Keisha lifted the insulated bag. Tonight? I want to get this to a child before your mistake becomes his emergency. She picked up the grocery bags, one in each hand, shoulders squared under the weight. After that, Mr. Owner, I want you to look in your own trash without me standing in it. She walked toward the Nissan. Noah unlocked the door from inside. Ray moved to help with the bags, then stopped and waited for permission. Keisha gave one small nod, and he carried only what she allowed. Julian stood under the security light with Heather beside him, watching the gray Nissan pull away from the loading dock with discarded bread, bruised apples, rice bowls, eggs, and insulin that should never have been discarded at all. The car turned onto the wet street and disappeared toward East 12th. Behind Julian, Heather was already preparing an explanation. In front of him, the dumpster remained open, full of evidence with expiration dates. For the first time in years, Julian Blackwell did not want a summary. He wanted to know exactly how much compassion his company had been throwing away after closing time. The gray Nissan did not leave the Whole Foods parking lot quickly, because cars with 200,000 miles on them did not respond well to urgency. Keisha turned the key once, listened to the engine hesitate, then turned it again with the patience of someone who knew begging a machine never helped but listening to it sometimes did. The dashboard lights flickered. Noah sat in the back seat with the blue insulated lunch bag beside him, both hands resting near it as if he had been trusted with something fragile and sacred. Is it still cold? Keisha asked, watching him in the rearview mirror. Noah pressed 2 fingers against the side of the bag the way he had seen her do. Cold enough, I think. Do not open it. I will not. His voice carried the seriousness of a child who had been given adult work too early. Keisha pulled out of the loading dock lane and turned toward East 12th, windshield wipers dragging water across the glass in tired half circles. Behind her, the Whole Foods sign glowed green and clean against the night, the kind of sign that made shoppers feel better before they even entered. In the rearview mirror, she saw Julian Blackwell still standing under the dock light in his expensive coat, small now, framed by the open dumpster, and Heather Collins beside him. Keisha did not let herself wonder whether his face meant anything. Rich guilt had a short shelf life. By morning it could be repackaged as concern, meeting notes, or a donation photo. She had seen that before. At the loading dock, Julian remained still until the Nissan disappeared beyond the corner. The rain had thinned into mist, but he did not step back inside. Heather stood beside him with her tablet held close to her chest, ready for order to return. Ray was near the west dumpster, writing down the items Keisha had taken, though his notes looked less like a security report and more like a confession. Julian looked at the painted slogan again, then at the open waste log on Heather's tablet. Show me the donation entries for tonight. Heather's fingers moved. There were none scheduled after 8. Why? Partner availability. Which partner? Our approved regional recovery vendor. Not Brooks House. Brooks House is not an approved vendor. Why not? Heather inhaled slowly. They failed documentation requirements. Ray looked up. Julian caught it. What documentation? Heather's lips pressed together. Temperature tracking, liability forms, pickup consistency, insurance verification. Did anyone help them complete it? That is not store-level responsibility. The answer was smooth, professional, and cold enough to make Julian understand how a shelter could be removed from a donation list without anyone ever having to say they were choosing not to feed children. He turned to Ray. You said you had seen her list before. Ray nodded. Yes, sir. How many times? 4. Maybe 5. And you reported it? Yes, sir. To Heather. Ray hesitated, then nodded again. Heather said. He submitted incident notes, not donation concerns. Ray looked at her, no longer able to remain silent. I submitted both. The dock quieted except for the hum of the refrigeration units. Julian watched Heather's face and recognized the same pause from upstairs, the half-second where truth reached the door and policy tried to lock it from inside. Pull up his reports. Heather did not move. Mr. Blackwell, we should review this in the morning with regional compliance. Pull them up now. Her fingers moved slower this time. Ray stood with his shoulders tight, as if he expected the screen to erase him. A list of incident reports appeared. Julian saw the dates. Thursday nights. Repeated entries. West Dock. Unscheduled individual. Discarded product removal. No threat observed. No sellable product taken. Possible food recovery for shelter. Recommended management review. Julian read that last line twice. Recommended management review, he said. Heather's tone remained controlled. Security staff often include personal impressions. Did you review it? I reviewed the trespass pattern. That was not my question. Heather looked toward the store door. Not in the way you are asking. Julian felt the first clear edge of anger, not loud, not explosive, but focused. The kind that did not want a target as much as a document. Send me every report Ray filed regarding Keisha Monroe. Heather's eyes flickered. Tonight. Now. While Heather sent the files, Julian walked to the dumpster and looked inside. From above, the waste had looked like a category. From up close, it had names. Bread with sesame seeds still sealed in clear backs. Organic peaches with bruises the size of quarters. Rice bowls with plastic lids intact. A carton of eggs with one broken shell. A bag of spinach that had wilted at the corners but was still usable if cooked by morning. Flowers brown at the edges, arranged in bundles that had cost more than Keisha's gas for the week. He thought of board reports where waste was measured in pounds, then diverted, reduced, offset, improved. No report had ever said 11 eggs were good and 1 was cracked. No report had ever said. A mother knew the difference. Ray stepped closer. Sir. Julian did not turn. Why did she say the insulin should have been in a locked cooler? Ray swallowed. Because pharmacy returns are supposed to be separated. Anything temperature sensitive goes into a marked return bin or cold chain storage until pickup. And tonight it was in a paper bag by the produce waste. Have you seen that before? Not insulin. Other pharmacy items? Ray looked at Heather, then back to Julian. Yes, sir. Sometimes. Heather snapped. That is not accurate. Ray's face tightened. I worked the dock, Heather. It was the first time he used her name without a title. Julian heard the shift. Something in the hierarchy had cracked, quietly but permanently. Heather stepped forward. The pharmacy partner handles their own returns. If items are placed in our disposal area, we follow the label provided. Julian asked. What label did this one have? Heather looked at the tablet. It is listed as non-saleable return. Not destroyed. Non saleable. Not expired. It does not say expired. Not unsafe. Heather did not answer. Julian looked at Ray. Does the system have a photograph? Ray shook his head. Only if a manager attaches one. Julian turned back to Heather. She was already preparing another sentence, but he no longer wanted sentences. Where is the chain of custody report? I will request it from the pharmacy partner. No. Where is ours? We may not have one if it was transferred under their account. Then how did it end up in our dumpster lane? Heather's face hardened. Mr. Blackwell, I understand the optics are uncomfortable, but we cannot let a former employee dictate operational judgment. Julian stared at her. The optics are not the problem. The insulin was in the trash. The word trash stayed between them, blunt and unpolished. For years his company had preferred disposal stream, waste diversion, non-saleable product, shrink control. Trash was what Keisha had called it with her hands inside it. Trash was what it became when there was no camera, no customer, no grant report, and no one poor enough nearby to make use of it. Across town, Keisha parked outside Brooks House Youth Shelter at 1118. The building was a converted church annex with beige siding, a ramp by the front door, and a mural of sunflowers painted by children who had signed only their first names. One porch light flickered. The other had burned out weeks ago. Keisha honked once, a soft tap, then stepped out with the insulated bag under her jacket. Noah stayed in the back seat half awake, holding the Friday pantry list. The door opened before Keisha reached it. Mrs. Evelyn Brooks stood there in a cardigan over a long denim skirt, gray curls wrapped in a scarf, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She was in her late 60s, short and solid, with the kind of eyes that could count pain in a room without making anyone feel inspected. "Tell me you have good news," she said. Keisha held out the insulated bag. "Cold. Unopened. Check it quick." Mrs. Evelyn did not waste time. She led Keisha into a small intake room where a battered mini refrigerator hummed beside shelves of canned beans, cereal, pasta, and donated diapers. A volunteer named Marcus, a college student in a faded Texas Longhorn sweatshirt, came in with a digital thermometer and a clipboard. Keisha placed the insulin box on the counter. Marcus checked the label, checked the temperature indicator, checked the expiration date, and looked at Mrs. Evelyn with relief. He tried to keep professional. "It is still within range." Mrs. Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 second. "Thank you, Lord." Keisha leaned against the counter, suddenly feeling every hour of the day in her knees. "Where is Eli?" "Asleep. His aunt is still trying to get the clinic issue fixed for morning." "He does not know?" "No child needs to know how close adults came to failing him." Keisha nodded. That sentence sat heavily in the room because all 3 adults knew it was only partly true. Children always knew something. They knew when voices went quiet. They knew when dinner got smaller. They knew when medicine was discussed. In whispers, Marcus began logging the box. Mrs. Evelyn looked at the grocery bags Keisha had brought in after the insulin. "You got all this tonight?" "Some bread, apples, rice bowls, eggs. Check everything again. I left anything questionable." "You always do. Do not say that like it makes this normal." Mrs. Evelyn's face softened. "It should not be normal. But you have made it careful." Keisha looked toward the hallway, where a small bulletin board held crayon drawings, chore charts, and a printed menu for Friday. Breakfast, oatmeal if available. Lunch, soup and bread. Dinner, pending donations. Pending. That word had haunted her since she first saw it. Pending meant a child could go to bed full if someone else remembered them in time. Pending meant dignity had to wait for leftovers. Pending meant 8 names depended on what a store decided to waste. Noah appeared in the doorway, rubbing one eye, holding the folded pantry list. "Mama, you forgot this." Keisha's face changed with alarm. "Noah, I told you to stay in the car. The doors were locked." "That is not the same thing." Mrs. Evelyn stepped in gently. "Come here, baby." Noah handed her the list. "We kept it dry." Mrs. Evelyn accepted it like it was a legal document. "That is important work." Noah looked around the small room. "Is Eli going to be okay?" Keisha opened her mouth to redirect him, but Mrs. Evelyn answered first. "Tonight, yes." Noah nodded, satisfied in the way children are when they receive one honest answer instead of 5 comforting ones. Then he looked at the shelves. "There is not a lot of food." Mrs. Evelyn smiled sadly. "Not yet." Keisha touched his shoulder. "We are going home after we help unload. I can carry bread. 1 bag. 2. 1. He accepted 1 because negotiation made him feel included. As they sorted the food, Keisha checked every label again with Marcus. Bread for breakfast. Apples for snacks after cutting around bruises. Rice bowls for Friday lunch if reheated by noon. Eggs for Saturday morning if stored immediately. Noah placed the bread on a shelf lower than the others so the younger kids could reach it. Keisha watched him and felt pride and pain twist together. She had never wanted her son to learn charity from the wrong side of hunger. She wanted him to learn generosity from abundance, not shortage. But there he was, careful and kind, putting rescued bread where other children could find it. Back at Whole Foods, Julian stood in the manager's office with Ray's reports now open on the large monitor. Heather sat rigidly at the desk, no longer performing confidence as easily. The reports were brief, factual, and damning because of how ordinary they were. Report 1. Former inventory employee observed removing discarded bakery items, stated destination Brooks House, no sellable merchandise involved. Report 2. Subject separated unsafe items and left them behind, recommended review of donation classification. Report 3. West dumpster locked after subject departed. Following manager instruction. Report 4. Subject asked whether Brooks' house could be reinstated as a donation partner. Referred to store management. Julian stopped reading. She asked to reinstate the shelter? Ray nodded. Yes, sir. Who handled that request? Heather's silence answered first. Then she said, Brooks' house did not meet compliance standards. That is not what I asked. She folded her hands. I did. Julian looked at the screen again. A detail in Report 3 caught him. Attached note. Former employee identified several discarded items as safe for donation based on past inventory classification training. Past inventory classification training. Julian clicked the employee archive link. Heather moved suddenly. That file is old. Then it should be easy to read. Her profile loaded. Keisha Monroe. Inventory clerk. Evening shift. Hire date. Training certifications. Temperature control. Product rotation. Donation sorting pilot. Corrective action. Termination. Julian saw the words donation sorting pilot and felt the night tilt. What is this pilot? Heather said. A discontinued internal trial. When? 3 years ago. Was Keisha involved? Several employees were. Ray said quietly. She ran most of it. Heather glared at him. Julian scrolled down. Performance notes appeared. Accurate. Dependable. Strong classification judgment. Excellent loss prevention cooperation. Then abruptly disciplinary entries. Unauthorized product removal. Failure to follow disposal chain. Creating confusion with unapproved donation partners. Julian read the last phrase aloud. Creating confusion with unapproved donation partners. He looked at Heather. That sounds like she was trying to donate food. Heather's voice sharpened. It sounds like she bypassed protocol. Protocol that turned safe food into trash. Protocol that protected the company. There it was again, naked now. Protected the company. Not the food. Not the children. Not the workers. The company. Julian leaned back from the screen. The first clue had not been the insulin, he realized. It had been the way Keisha moved. The way Ray hesitated. The way Heather spoke too quickly. The way a shelter list had more moral clarity than the company's compliance portal. The insulin was only the first thing visible enough to shame him. At Brooks' house, Mrs. Evelyn walked Keisha to the door after the last bag was sorted. You need sleep. Keisha smiled faintly. I need rent. You need both. Only one can be paid late without a fee. Mrs. Evelyn touched her arm. That man from the store. You think he will do anything? Keisha looked toward the Nissan, where Noah had climbed back into the rear seat and was trying to stay awake. Men like that do something when it costs less than doing nothing. Maybe tonight cost him something. Keisha looked back toward the direction of Whole Foods. Maybe. But I am not building hope out of a billionaire's bad night. Mrs. Evelyn nodded slowly. Fair. Keisha stepped off the porch, then paused. If anyone calls asking about me, do not tell them more than you have to. You think they will? Now that he saw the list, yes. Mrs. Evelyn folded her arms against the cold. Then maybe it is time he sees the rest. Keisha did not answer. She got into the Nissan, started the engine on the second try, and pulled away with Noah already asleep in the back seat. In her pocket, her phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number lit the cracked screen. Miss Monroe, this is Julian Blackwell. I need to understand what happened when you worked for my store. Keisha stared at the message at the red light until the car behind her tapped its horn. She did not reply. Not because she had nothing to say, but because the truth was not a favor she owed him. It was a debt his company had been avoiding, and by morning, he would have to decide whether he wanted the story from the woman he had watched in the trash or from the people who had put her there. Keisha did not answer Julian Blackwell that night, but she did not sleep either. After she carried Noah upstairs, loosened his sneakers, checked his breathing, and placed the allergy medicine beside his bed, she sat at the kitchen table with the phone face down beside the Friday pantry list. The apartment was quiet in the way poor homes become quiet after midnight. Not peaceful, just careful. The refrigerator hummed. A faucet ticked once every few seconds. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped and stopped. Keisha folded and unfolded the corner of Mrs. Evelyn's list until the paper grew soft beneath her thumb. Julian's message stayed unread in her mind even after the screen went dark. I need to understand what happened when you worked for my store. She almost laughed at that. Men with offices above grocery stores loved the word understand after the damage was already done. They did not ask to understand when the first email came. They did not ask to understand when a mother lost her insurance. They did not ask to understand when a supervisor escorted her out through the same back hallway where she had once stayed late to fix other people's mistakes. But memory did not wait for permission. It came back anyway, bright as fluorescent light. 3 years earlier, Keisha Monroe had believed Whole Foods might be the job that let her stop living one emergency behind. Noah was 4 then, small enough to fall asleep in the child's seat with a cracker in his hand, old enough to know when his mother smiled too much because she was trying not to worry. The job paid better than hotel cleaning, offered health insurance after 90 days, and came with a schedule that was hard but steady. Evening inventory 4 o'clock to midnight, 5 days a week. Keisha liked inventory because numbers did not care how tired she was. Cases in, cases out. Dates checked. Temperature logs signed. Shelf rotation corrected. Waste coded. Donation flagged. If something was safe, it could still matter. If something was unsafe, it had to go. The work had rules, and in the beginning Keisha trusted rules because she had spent her life inside systems where rules changed depending on who was looking at you. At Whole Foods she learned fast. She knew which prepared meals could be donated before close, which produce could go to soup kitchens if delivered within time, which dairy items needed stricter handling, which bakery products were still sealed and safe after the front shelves were reset. She could read an expiration label upside down while pushing a cart. She could tell by condensation whether a cold item had been sitting too long. She memorized the donation binder before anyone asked her to because the binder made sense to her. Food did not stop being food because a display needed to look perfect. A sealed loaf of bread did not become morally complicated because a store had no shelf space left. Her first month, she caught a pallet of yogurt entered under the wrong disposal code and saved 36 cases for a community pantry. Heather Collins praised her then, in front of 2 assistant managers. Good eye, Keisha. That is the kind of attention we need. Keisha went home that night proud enough to buy Noah a small carton of strawberries from the discount rack. She washed them, cut off 2 bruised spots, and watched him eat them one at a time like candy. She thought maybe this was how life changed, not all at once but by getting close enough to stable that your child could taste fruit without a holiday. The donation sorting pilot started that winter. Corporate wanted better numbers for its zero waste report, and East Austin had been selected because the store had high prepared food volume and strong neighborhood visibility. Keisha was not given a title, but everyone knew she did most of the work. She set up labeled bins in the back room. Donate today, staff meal, compost, true waste, hold for manager review. She made simple charts for employees who did not have time to read long compliance manuals. Green sticker meant safe donation if sealed and cold. Yellow meant check temperature and date. Red meant discard. She stayed after her shift twice to train new closers. Ray Turner, who had just started night security, would lean near the dock door and watch her argue with the chaos of the back room until it made sense. You run this place better than the people W. By 8:20 the next morning, Julian Blackwell had already read enough to know the story Heather Collins had told him was too small to be true. He had not gone home after the loading dock. He had stayed in the second-floor office until sunrise, jacket folded over a chair, tie loosened, coffee untouched and cold beside the tablet while Ray's reports, Keisha's old employee profile, and fragments of the discontinued donation pilot opened one after another like rooms in a house nobody had cleaned before company arrived. The February waste logs were incomplete. That was the first thing he noticed. Not missing entirely, not erased in a way that would alarm an auditor at first glance, but softened, rounded, reclassified. A cart of prepared meals became general shrink. Bakery bags became packaging compromise. Yogurt cases became temperature uncertainty without an attached temperature reading. The language was professional, and that made it worse. Someone had known exactly how to make good food disappear without making the report look hungry. At 6:45, Julian sent one message to Heather. Do not alter, delete, or close any waste, donation, pharmacy return, or incident record. Preserve all current and archived documents. At 6:46, she replied, of course. At 6:52, the regional compliance director called him, which told Julian Heather had called someone else first. By 7:30, 2 compliance staff members were on their way from Dallas. A legal liaison was asking whether this should be handled quietly, and Julian had ordered the East Austin store to delay all non-essential disposal until further review. That single instruction caused more panic inside the company than the idea of a mother taking bread from a dumpster had ever caused. By 9:15, Keisha was in a hotel hallway on the 11th floor, pushing a cart with towels stacked higher than her shoulder, when her phone began buzzing in her pocket. She ignored the first call because room 1108 had a checkout request, and she needed the hours. She ignored the second because the supervisor was walking past. The third came from Mrs. Evelyn, and that one she answered from inside the supply closet with the door cracked open. "Are you sitting down?" Mrs. Evelyn asked. Keisha looked at the mop buckets and paper towels around her. "No, maybe pretend." "What happened?" "A woman from Blackwell Fresh called Brooks' house asking for our donation records from the pilot year." Keisha closed her eyes. "Already?" She was polite. Too polite. Said it was part of an internal review. "Did you send anything?" "I told her we would cooperate when we knew whether this was a review or a cleanup." Keisha almost smiled. "What did she say?" "She said Mr. Blackwell wants to make things right." Keisha opened her eyes. People always say that before they ask what right will cost. Mrs. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Baby, they may come after you harder before they help you." Keisha knew. She had known since the moment Julian saw the pantry list. A hidden thing did not stay buried politely. Somebody always tried to push the dirt back over it. At 11 o'clock, the pushback arrived. Her phone showed an email from Blackwell Fresh Holdings with the subject line, "Request for confidential conversation." She waited until lunch break to open it. She sat behind the hotel near the employee smoking area, though she did not smoke, with a peanut butter sandwich she had packed for herself and then forgotten to eat. The email was from a senior human resources advisor she had never met. It said the company had become aware of recent concerns involving past employment and current after-hours access to store property. It invited her to a private conversation that afternoon at the East Austin store. It used words like support, clarity, mutual resolution, and safety. It did not use the words apology, termination, shelter, insulin, or destroyed food. The bottom, in clean legal language, it advised her not to share company information, proprietary records, or internal processes with outside parties while the matter was under review. Keisha read that sentence 3 times, not because she did not understand it, but because she understood it too well. She took a screenshot and sent it to Mrs. Evelyn. Then she sent one message to Julian. "Is this your idea of understanding?" He replied in less than a minute. "No. Where are you?" She did not answer. She had rooms to clean. By 3:15, Keisha picked up Noah from school and found a printed notice tucked under the windshield wiper of her Nissan. Not from the city. Not from the landlord. From Whole Foods Security. It was a formal trespass warning, dated that morning, stating that she was prohibited from entering or remaining on the property of the East Austin location, or any restricted service area affiliated with Blackwell Fresh Holdings. Ray had not signed it. Another guard had. Keisha stood in the school parking lot with the paper in her hand while children ran past with backpacks bouncing and parents idled in cars with air conditioning humming. Noah looked up at her. "Is it a bill?" "No." "Is it worse?" She folded the notice before he could read too much. "Not if we do not let it be." He did not believe her, but he wanted to. That was enough to hurt. She drove home without turning on the radio. Halfway there, Julian called. She almost let it ring out. Then she answered on speaker because Noah was in the car and secrecy had already stolen too much from them. "Miss Monroe," Julian said, "I did not authorize that notice. But your company did." Silence. Then, "Yes. That is the part people like you always try to step around." "I am not trying to step around it." "Then step on it." "I am working on it." Keisha laughed once, tired and sharp. "I cannot pay rent with working on it." Julian did not answer quickly. She could hear traffic on his end, the low sound of a car interior too quiet to be ordinary. "I want to meet you," he said. "Not at the store." No, not with Heather. No, where? Keisha looked at Noah in the mirror. He was watching raindrops slide down the window even though the sky had cleared hours ago. Brooks' house. 6 o'clock. Mrs. Evelyn present. I will be there. And Mr. Blackwell? Yes. If you bring cameras, lawyers, or a check with silence attached to it, I will leave before you sit down. Understood? No. You have heard it. You have not understood it yet. She ended the call. At 5:58, Julian arrived at Brooks' house in a black electric sedan without a driver, which Mrs. Evelyn noticed from the porch and did not praise. He wore no cashmere coat this time, only a dark blazer and open-collar shirt, but money still entered the room before he did. It was in the watch, the shoes, the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to doors opening on the first pull. Keisha was already seated at a folding table in the community room, Noah beside her with homework spread in front of him, Mrs. Evelyn at the end of the table with a legal pad, and Marcus leaning near the pantry shelves pretending to organize canned goods so he could witness if needed. On the table in front of Keisha were 3 things: the trespass notice, the email from Human Resources printed at the public library, and the old termination letter from the shoebox under her couch. Julian looked at the papers before sitting. I am sorry. Keisha did not move. For which one? The question stopped him because a general apology could not survive contact with 3 documents. He pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. For all of them. But I know that is not enough. Good. Saves time. Mrs. Evelyn's mouth twitched, but she said nothing. Julian placed a folder on the table. I brought what I could access today. Ray's incident reports. Your training record. Partial donation pilot records. Waste summaries from the February week you mentioned. Keisha looked at the folder but did not touch it. Partial. Yes. Because the rest is missing? Because the rest has not been produced yet. That is a soft way to say missing. Julian accepted that. Yes. Before he could continue, the door opened. Heather Collins stepped into the community room with a man in a gray suit and a woman carrying a leather portfolio. Keisha stood immediately. Noah looked up from his homework. Mrs. Evelyn rose more slowly, but the room changed around her. Julian turned, surprise hardening his face. Heather, why are you here? Heather's smile was strained but professional. I was advised that any conversation involving company records and a former employee should include management and legal representation. The man in the gray suit offered a business card. Grant Ellison, outside counsel for Blackwell Fresh Holdings. Keisha did not take it. Mrs. Evelyn did, looked at it, and placed it face down on the table like something that had already failed a moral inspection. Julian's voice lowered. I did not invite you. Heather held his gaze. With respect, you may not have intended to, but the company has obligations. The company also had obligations last night when Insulin was in a trash lane. Heather's face tightened. Grant Ellison stepped forward with the calm of someone paid to slow truth until it lost momentum. We are not here to create conflict. We are here to offer a constructive path. Keisha looked at the portfolio in the woman's hand. There it is. The woman placed the documents on the table. Grant spoke gently, almost kindly. Miss Monroe, the company recognizes that there may have been misunderstandings regarding your prior separation and recent activities. Without admitting fault, Blackwell Fresh is prepared to offer immediate assistance. Emergency housing support, grocery credit, medical cost reimbursement for your son, and a consulting opportunity related to community outreach. Noah's pencil stopped moving. Keisha felt it more than saw it. Medical cost reimbursement, housing support, grocery credit. Words designed to find the cracks in a mother's armor. Julian looked at Grant, then at Heather, realizing too late what they had brought into the room. Grant continued. In exchange, we would ask for confidentiality while the company completes its review, non-disparagement from all parties, and a mutual release regarding past employment claims and unauthorized access incidents. Keisha stared at the document. She saw the amount on the second page. It was more money than she had seen at once in years. Enough to pay rent, fix the Nissan, buy Noah's medicine without coins, fill the refrigerator, maybe even sleep one night without calculating disaster. For one dangerous second, the offer did what it was built to do. It made silence look like shelter. Noah looked at her, not understanding every word, but understanding enough to know adults had placed a price on something. Mrs. Evelyn watched Keisha, not pushing, not rescuing, only staying present the way strong people do when someone has to choose their own dignity. Keisha reached for the document. Heather's shoulders relaxed a fraction. Grant slid a pen toward her. Julian said, "Miss Monroe, you do not have to sign anything tonight." Keisha looked at him. "I know." She picked up the pen not to sign, but to move it away from Noah's homework. Then she placed the trespass notice on top of the offer, then the human resources email, then the termination letter. Last, she took the folded pantry list from her jacket pocket and placed it above all of them. The paper was worn now, softened by rain and pocket creases, but the names were still readable. Malik, Tasha, Brianna, Eli. For more beneath them. "This is the problem with people who confuse help with control," she said quietly. "You come into a shelter with a check, and think the room will forget why children needed rescued food in the first place." Grant began. "Miss Monroe, that is not a fair characterization." Keisha turned to him. "Fair is not a word you get to borrow tonight." Heather said, "This offer is more generous than required." "Required by what?" Keisha asked. "Law." Heather did not answer. "That is exactly what scares me. Your legal minimum is standing where your conscience should be." Julian looked down. The sentence landed on him too, and he knew it should. Keisha pointed to the offer. "You are not offering help. You are trying to make hunger sign a non-disclosure." The room became completely silent. Even Noah understood silence that deep. Grant's expression changed first, not to guilt but to calculation. Heather looked angry now, truly angry because Keisha had named the mechanism out loud. Julian sat very still. He had heard many powerful sentences in boardrooms, but none had ever made a 7-page agreement look so small. Keisha slid the documents back across the table. "I need money. Do not think I do not. My rent is late. My car is tired. My son knows the sound of a pharmacy total before he should know long division. So do not insult me by thinking this is easy." Her voice shook once, then steadied. "But if I sign that, Brooks' house stays unapproved. The waste logs stay buried. Ray's reports stay personal impressions. Heather keeps calling me a trespasser. Your stores keep throwing away dinner and calling it protection. And next Thursday, some other child waits on a list while good food goes into a locked dumpster." Noah looked down at his worksheet, blinking hard. Keisha placed one hand on his shoulder without looking away from the adults. "My son is not going to learn that survival means selling the truth wholesale." Julian closed the folder he had brought. "What do you want instead?" Grant cut in. "Mr. Blackwell, I would advise against negotiating outside counsel structure." Julian did not look at him. "I asked her." Keisha looked at Julian for a long moment, searching for the difference between guilt and courage. "I want the trespass notice withdrawn by tonight. I want my termination file corrected. I want every waste and donation log from the pilot year preserved by an outside auditor, not your friends in compliance. I want Brooks' house reinstated with real support to meet the paperwork you use as a gate. I want Ray protected for telling the truth. I want Heather removed from anything involving this review. I want the pharmacy return chain investigated. And I want the policy changed so safe food gets offered to approved community partners before anyone is allowed to destroy it." Heather said, "That is unrealistic." Mrs. Evelyn finally spoke. "No, baby. Unrealistic is a city full of hungry children behind stores full of locked trash." Julian looked at the pantry shelves, the homework on the table, the printed offer, the old termination letter, the names on the list, and the mother who had just turned down the only easy money in the room. He understood then that this was no longer about whether he felt sorry for Keisha Monroe. Feeling sorry would have let him stay powerful and generous. She was asking him to become accountable, which was much more expensive. He stood. Grant stood too, alarmed. Heather took one step forward. Julian looked at both of them. "The offer is withdrawn," Grant said. "That may create exposure." Julian's voice was quiet. "Good. Maybe exposure is what happens when something has been hidden too long." Then he turned to Keisha. "The trespass notice will be withdrawn tonight. Heather will not oversee this review. I will put the rest in writing." Keisha did not thank him. She gathered Noah's homework and the pantry list. Put it in action. As Julian left Brooke's house, he saw the shelter's small refrigerator through the open pantry door. It was dented, humming, crowded with labeled containers and one box of insulin that had nearly been lost to his company's carelessness. Outside, the black sedan waited by the curb. Behind him, in a building with flickering porch lights and donated shelves, a mother had refused to let poverty become a signature at the bottom of a silence agreement. Julian had walked in hoping to solve a problem. He walked out knowing the problem had his company's name on it. That night, after Brooke's house went quiet and the black sedan disappeared from the curb, Keisha drove home with Noah asleep in the back seat and the rejected agreement still folded in her tote bag like a weight she had chosen to carry instead of a lifeline she had chosen to take. The streets of East Austin were damp from the earlier rain, reflecting traffic lights in long red and green streaks across the pavement. Restaurants were closing. Delivery drivers waited outside glass doors with insulated bags. Couples stepped out of expensive apartment buildings where old houses used to stand. Keisha stopped at a red light and looked at the gas gauge. The needle rested so close to empty it seemed to be making a threat. Her phone buzzed with a reminder from the rent portal. Payment due in 3 days, late fee applied after 5 o'clock. Another notification showed the pharmacy app reminding her Noah's next refill was eligible soon. Eligible did not mean affordable. Eligible only meant the system was ready to ask for money again. In the rearview mirror, Noah's head leaned against the seatbelt. His mouth was slightly open, his breathing steady for now. Keisha watched him and felt the offer return to her mind, not as words on paper, but as possibilities. Rent paid. Gas tank full. Medicine without counting coins. A grocery cart with food chosen from shelves instead of rescued from trash. A new pair of shoes for Noah before the Sauls opened. 1 month, maybe 2, without waking up already behind. That was the cruelty of the offer. It had been wrong, but it had not been useless. It had been designed by people who knew the price of immediate fear. When she carried Noah upstairs, he woke enough to ask, "Did you say no because of me?" Keisha paused in the doorway of their apartment. The hallway light flickered above them. Someone down the hall was cooking onions. A baby cried 2 apartments over. She shifted his backpack onto her shoulder and looked at him carefully. "I said no because of what they were asking me to trade." Noah rubbed his eyes. "But it was money." "Yes. And we need money." There it was, the truth no bedtime story could soften. Keisha unlocked the door. "We do." Inside, she helped him take off his shoes and gave him water. He sat at the edge of his bed, small in his school shirt, hair slightly loosened from the long day. Then was it bad to say no? Keisha sat beside him. For a moment, she wanted to give him the easy answer. The one mothers give when they need children to sleep. But Noah had watched too much truth from back seats and waiting rooms to be fed something hollow. "Sometimes," she said, "a bad deal comes wrapped in something you really need. That does not make needing it wrong. It means the person offering it knows where you hurt." Noah looked at his hands. "If you signed it, would Brooke's house still get food? Maybe once. Maybe for a photo. Maybe for a little while. But not for real. Not unless the rules changed." He nodded slowly, working through it. "So you said no for the rules." Keisha touched his cheek. "I said no because if I let them buy my silence, they would call. That help. And one day when somebody tried to buy yours, you might think that is what help looks like." Noah leaned against her shoulder. "I do not want people to buy my silence." "Then we practice early." He was quiet for a long time. "Are you scared?" Keisha kissed the top of his head. "Yes. Me too. I know. But you still said no." She closed her eyes. "Yes." He whispered, "Then I am proud of you." That nearly broke her more than the offer had. She held him until his breathing slowed, then tucked him in and placed the medicine box on the nightstand. In the kitchen, she sat alone under the weak bulb and finally unfolded the agreement again. The dollar amount looked even larger in her apartment than it had in the shelter. On the folding table at Brooke's house, surrounded by witnesses, it had looked like pressure. Here, beside an overdue electric notice and a refrigerator with too much empty space, it looked like rescue. Keisha placed the offer next to the pantry list. Legal paper beside shelter paper. One written to close a story. One written because children still needed food by Friday. She took out her phone and opened her bank app. $42.13. Then she opened the rent portal and closed it before the balance finished loading. Some numbers did not need to be seen twice. Her thumb hovered over Julian's contact. He had said the offer was withdrawn. He had said he would put action in writing. But action had not reached her kitchen. Action had not filled the gas tank. Action had not removed the red notice from her screen. She could still message him. She could say she changed her mind. She could ask for a smaller agreement, a private one, a temporary one. She could tell herself it was for Noah. The thought came quietly, and because it sounded like a mother's love, it was the most dangerous thought in the room. Keisha stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. She went to the couch, pulled out the shoebox, and took out the old Whole Foods name tag. K. Monroe. The plastic was scratched. The green logo had faded at the edge. She held it in her palm and remembered the day she wore it home after training, proud enough to show Noah even. Though he was too young to read all the letters. She had believed that job would make life safer. Instead, the same company had tried to make her sign away the truth of why it had not. Her phone buzzed. This time it was Mrs. Evelyn. Are you awake? Keisha typed back yes. The reply came quickly. Do not sit alone with what they offered. That is how they make it grow teeth. Keisha stared at the message and laughed softly despite the ache in her chest. Then Mrs. Evelyn called. Keisha answered. You have a camera in my apartment? No, baby. I have been poor before. Keisha sat back down. It was a lot of money. I know. Noah asked if it was bad to say no. What did you tell him? That a bad deal can come wrapped in something you need. Mrs. Evelyn was quiet, then said, That is a sermon right there. Keisha rubbed her forehead. I am tired of preaching. I want groceries. Of course you do. I want rent paid. Of course you do. I want my child to stop learning adult words like late fee and reimbursement. Of course you do. Keisha's voice lowered. Then why does doing the right thing feel like leaving him in danger? Mrs. Evelyn answered slowly. Because systems like that make sure the right thing costs the most to the people with the least. Keisha pressed the old name tag flat on the table. What if I cannot afford it? Then we help you carry the cost. But we do not let them rename the cost as your fault. After the call ended, Keisha took photos of the agreement, the trespass notice, the human resources email, the termination letter, the old name tag, and the pantry list. She created a folder on her phone and named it what they threw away. Then she wrote a message to Julian, not long, not emotional, not pleading. You asked what I want. I want the truth preserved before your people soften it. By noon tomorrow, send written confirmation that all waste logs, donation records, pharmacy return records, security reports, and employee records connected to the pilot are under outside preservation. Send written confirmation that Brooks House will not be contacted through legal pressure. Send written confirmation that Ray Turner will not be disciplined. Until then, do not call this help. She read it twice and sent it before fear could edit it into politeness. Across town, Julian received the message while sitting in a conference room at Blackwell Fresh Regional Headquarters. The room had a glass wall, a long table, a screen displaying the company logo, and 7 people discussing exposure as if exposure were a disease instead of light. Grant Ellison, the outside counsel, stood near the screen, explaining that the company should limit direct contact with Keisha Monroe, centralize communications, and avoid creating discoverable statements that implied wrongdoing. A compliance director suggested an internal audit with confidential findings. A public relations executive suggested preparing language about Blackwell Fresh's long-standing commitment to food recovery. Heather Collins appeared by video from the East Austin store, composed again, using phrases like former employee grievance and unauthorized access pattern. Julian had been listening without speaking, his phone face down until it buzzed. He read Keisha's message once, then again. The room continued around him. Liability, narrative control, reputational risk, preliminary review, good faith outreach. Julian looked at the people his company paid to reduce truth into manageable categories and understood the test Keisha had placed before him. Not whether he felt moved, not whether he could write a check, not whether he could remove Heather quietly and keep the brand intact. The test was whether he would protect the evidence even if it harmed him. He placed the phone on the table. Stop. The room quieted. Grant turned. Mr. Blackwell? Julian looked at the screen where Heather's face waited in a neat rectangle. Effective immediately, the East Austin Review is under independent preservation. Not internal. Independent. All waste logs, donation records, pharmacy return records, security reports, employee files, emails, and camera footage connected to the donation pilot, Keisha Monroe, Brooks House, and Thursday disposal procedures are to be preserved.
No delation, no alteration, no reclassification, no routine purge.
Grant's face tightened. That is a broad hold. Good. The compliance director said. We should define scope carefully. I just did. Heather leaned toward her camera. Julian, with respect, this gives credibility to allegations that have not been substantiated. Julian looked directly at her image. Then the record should have no trouble surviving daylight. The public relations executive began. We need to prepare messaging. No messaging, Julian said. Not before facts. Grant took a careful breath. There is also the matter of Ray Turner. If he failed to enforce access policy, discipline may still be appropriate. Julian's answer came immediately. Ray Turner is protected. Any retaliation against him will be treated as obstruction. Heather's expression shifted. Only slightly. Enough. Julian continued. Brooks House is not to be pressured, discouraged, or routed through legal intimidation. If they have records, they are to be requested respectfully through the independent review, with their own counsel or advisor if they choose. And the trespass warning against Keisha Monroe is withdrawn in writing today, Grant said. This may increase exposure. Julian looked around the room at the expensive chairs, the polished table, the logo glowing behind them. I keep hearing that word as if exposure is the danger. It is not. The danger is that we built a company that needed a mother in a dumpster to show us our own policy. No one spoke. For the first time in years, Julian did not fill the silence with strategy. He let it accuse them. Then he picked up his phone and replied to Keisha. You are right. Written confirmations are being sent today. Independent preservation begins now. Ray is protected. Brooks House will not be pressured. The trespass notice is withdrawn. This is not enough, but it is the first thing I can do that is not asking you to trust me. Keisha read the message at 12:18 in the morning, standing barefoot in her kitchen. It did not pay her rent. It did not fix the car. It did not erase the years. But it did something the money had not done. It moved power without buying silence. She placed the phone beside the pantry list, turned off the kitchen light, and stood for a moment in the dark apartment, listening to Noah breathe from the bedroom. She was still scared. She was still broke. She was still tired enough to feel it in her bones. But the test had not ended with her refusal. It had crossed the city and entered a boardroom. And for the first time, the people who had spent years asking hungry families to wait for approved channels were being asked to wait for the truth they could no longer control. By sunrise, the truth had stopped being a feeling and started becoming a file. Julian Blackwell stood inside a temporary review room at the East Austin store, the same building where customers would soon walk through warm aisles and choose $8 strawberries beneath signs about responsible sourcing. But behind the public floor, in a former training room with whiteboards, folding tables, and a humming wall unit, the company's clean language was being pulled apart one record at a time. 3 outside auditors sat with laptops open. Ray Turner stood near the door, not in his security jacket now, but in a plain blue shirt, looking like a man who had spent years telling the truth softly, and was not sure what would happen now that someone had turned up the volume. Julian had ordered Heather Collins removed from store operations pending review, but she was still in the building with counsel, still sending polished objections through official channels, still trying to make the investigation sound like a misunderstanding before the evidence became a verdict. On the table lay printed waste logs from the February pilot year, donation routing reports, pharmacy return slips, archive security incident notes, temperature records, employee performance reviews, and screenshots from old emails recovered from a server backup no one had expected the chief executive officer to personally demand. First, the documents looked ordinary. That was the genius of the lie. Nothing screamed. Nothing confessed. Everything appeared in columns, codes, timestamps, and managerial notes. Then the auditors started placing records side by side. A prepared foods cart marked destroyed at 10:42 had temperature logs showing safe cold holding at 10:39. A bakery disposal batch, labeled packaging compromised, had photographs from inventory showing sealed bags before the disposal code changed. Yogurt cases marked temperature uncertainty had no failed temperature reading attached. Donation pickup canceled due to partner inconsistency had a text from Brooks' house confirming they were available within 15 minutes. Julian read each connection in silence, and with every page, the company he had defended in interviews became less like an institution that had made mistakes and more like a machine that had learned how to hide conscience in paperwork. At 9:12, one auditor named Carla Mendoza pushed a printed email toward him. "You need to see this thread." Julian took it. The subject line was Keisha Monroe's old message: "Donation classification concern, East Austin store." Below it were her words from 3 years earlier, calm, specific, almost painfully respectful. She had cited policy numbers. She had listed dates. She had attached photos. She had asked whether safe-sealed products should be offered to Brooks' house before destruction, when the approved regional vendor missed pickup. Her message had been forwarded by a regional operations assistant to Heather with a note: "Is this something we need to address for the pilot report?" Heather's reply appeared beneath it: "Do not escalate. Employee is overstepping role and creating confusion around liability exposure. Keep donation reporting aligned with approved partner activity only." Julian read that last sentence again. Keep donation reporting aligned with approved partner activity only. It did not say feed children. It did not say recover food. It said align reporting. Julian set the paper down slowly. Where did this thread go after that? Carla clicked through the archive. It was forwarded to legal risk with a request for language regarding unauthorized product movement. Before she was terminated? 2 days before. Ray looked down. Julian saw his hands tighten. The next file opened on the monitor was Keisha's corrective action form. The wording was familiar now because he had seen it repeated in later reports. Unauthorized product removal, failure to follow disposal chain, creating confusion with unapproved donation partners. But the document contained an attached internal comment that had not been visible in the employee portal. Heather's note: recommend firm action before pilot audit. Employee continues to challenge management discretion and may compromise store performance narrative. Julian felt the room sharpen around those words. Store performance narrative. There it was, more honest than all the official language around it. Not safety. Not compliance. Narrative. He looked at Grant Ellison, the outside counsel who had joined the review only after Julian made it clear obstruction would not be protected. Grant's expression remained professional, but his pen had stopped moving. Julian asked, "Did legal approve this termination?" Grant answered carefully. Legal provided standard language based on management's representation. Based on Heather's representation. Based on store management's representation. Say her name. Grant paused. Based on Heather Collins's representation. Julian turned back to the monitor. Continue. The auditors moved to the security footage. The video was grainy, silent, and time-stamped from a Thursday night in February 3 years earlier. Keisha appeared in a green apron, hair pulled back, standing in the back room beside 2 carts of sealed food. A closing lead moved toward the bakery bags with a box cutter. Keisha lifted one hand, not aggressively, not wildly, just firmly, stopping the next bag from being ruined. She pointed to the temperature log on the clipboard. She pointed to the donation binder. She pointed to the cart. The closing lead shook his head and held up his phone, likely showing Heather's instruction. Keisha took a photograph of the log, then another of the food. Minutes later, the Brooks House church van appeared at the dock. Mrs. Evelyn stepped out in a long coat, joined by a young volunteer. Keisha handed over the food, along with what looked like printed temperature records. Every motion was careful. Every item was checked. The video did not show a thief. It showed an employee doing the work the company claimed to believe in. Ray spoke for the first time in almost half an hour. "That is the night I told you about." Julian did not look away from the screen. "The night she was suspended." "Yes, sir." The footage continued. After the van left, Heather appeared on screen, arriving through the dock door, though her time card showed she had been off-site. She spoke to the closing lead. She looked toward the camera. Then she reached up and turned the camera slightly toward the far wall. The room went silent. Carla rewound the footage, then played it again. Heather looked at the camera, then adjusted it. The feed still recorded the edge of the dock, but no longer showed the disposal area clearly. Julian felt his pulse in his throat. How long did the camera stay that way? Carla checked. Until the next morning. Was that documented? No. Julian turned to Grant. Is that standard? Grant did not answer immediately. No, it was the smallest word in the room, and somehow the heaviest. By 10:30, Brooks' house records arrived through Mrs. Evelyn's volunteer attorney. Not because the company pressured them, but because Keisha had agreed that the truth needed more than memory. The records were scanned copies, imperfect, handwritten, stubbornly human. A shelter pantry receipt from the February night. Temperature log signed by Marcus. A menu changed from pending donations to rice bowls, yogurt, apples, bread. A note in Mrs. Evelyn's handwriting. Keisha delivered safe food after store refused pickup approval. Fed 12 children, 3 mothers, 2 overnight volunteers. Julian placed that page beside the company's destroyed product report for the same items. 2 truths existed on the table. In one, food had been destroyed. In the other, children had eaten it. Only one could be morally true. Then came the pharmacy chain. The insulin Keisha had recovered the night before had not been expired. It had not been recalled. It had not been logged for destruction. A courier delay and a miscommunication between the pharmacy partner and the store had left the return bag at the dock. Policy required any temperature-sensitive medication to be placed in a marked cold chain container until transfer. Instead, a floor supervisor had moved it with general returns to clear space before inventory close. A manager note on the pharmacy partner ticket read, non-saleable. Removed before morning inspection. There was no chain of custody completion. No cold storage confirmation.
No disposal gusere.
If Keisha had not recognized the bag, it would have sat beside produce waste until morning, long enough to become unusable. Julian read the child's first name on the shelter medical request, partially redacted but still visible enough to confirm what Keisha had said. Eli. A child with a need. A clock ticking. A system that had treated both as inconvenience. Julian pushed back from the table and walked to the window that overlooked the store floor. Customers had begun entering now. A woman in yoga pants selected flowers. A man in a business vest compared coffee beans. A father lifted a child into a shopping cart near a display of organic oranges stacked into a perfect pyramid. None of them knew that behind the wall, the company's promise had split open. Julian watched them and felt the old temptation to manage the story rise inside him. He could contain this. Remove Heather. Reinstate Keisha privately. Donate to Brooks' house. Issue a statement about isolated failure. Protect the brand. Protect the board. Protect investors. Protect the version of himself people applauded. Then he turned back and saw Ray standing beside a table full of reports no one had acted on. He saw Mrs. Evelyn's handwritten note. He saw Keisha's old email, polite enough to beg a system to become what it advertised. He saw the line about store performance narrative. And he understood that containment would be another form of waste. At 11:07, Keisha arrived at the store, not through the front entrance, but through the side door by the review room because Julian had asked, and Mrs. Evelyn had insisted on coming with her. Noah was at school. Keisha wore her hotel uniform under a plain jacket, because she had taken only an hour off and could not afford more. She carried no dramatic folder, only a small notebook and the old Whole Foods name tag in her pocket. When she entered, Ray stood a little straighter. Julian stood too. Heather was not in the room, but her shadow was on almost every page. Keisha looked at the tables and then at Julian. You found some of it. Yes. Some is not all. I know. Carla explained the recovered emails, the altered classifications, the camera adjustment, the pharmacy return failure, the report suppression. She did it plainly without performance. Keisha listened without sitting. Her face did not change when her old emails appeared, but her fingers closed around the edge of her notebook. When the security footage played, she looked away only once, not when she was shown giving food to Brooks' house, but when her younger self stood beside the carts in the green apron, still believing rules could be appealed to by showing them the truth. Mrs. Evelyn placed a hand lightly on her back. You do not have to watch. Keisha's voice was steady. Yes, I do. The video ended. Julian turned to her. You were right. Keisha looked at him. That is not enough. I know. Say what I was right about. Julian absorbed that, then nodded. You were right that safe food was being classified as destroyed to protect store performance and reduce complications around donation. You were right that Brooks House was removed from practical access instead of helped into compliance. You were right that Ray's reports were ignored. You were right that your termination was based on a false narrative. You were right that the insulin should never have been near the trash. Keisha held his gaze. And the room waited. Julian knew what she was asking. Not for a fact. For ownership. He took a breath. And I was wrong to build a company where reports about hunger could be treated as inconvenience, because they did not fit the story I wanted to tell about myself. Grant shifted uncomfortably. Julian continued anyway. I was wrong to mistake donation numbers for mercy. I was wrong to let managers use liability as a shield against conscience. I was wrong to believe that if the front of the store looked ethical, the back of the store must be ethical too. Keisha's eyes shone, but she did not cry. Heather told people I stole. Julian nodded. Yes. Stores stopped calling me back. Yes. My insurance ended before Noah's refill. Julian's face tightened. Yes. Brooks House lost 3 years of food because your people made help too hard and waste too easy. Yes. She took the old name tag from her pocket and placed it on the table. K. Monroe. The scratched plastic landed softly, but Julian felt it as a strike. This little thing cost me more than your offer. Julian looked at it. We will correct your employment record. Not quietly. Not quietly. We will restore lost wages and benefits. That is paperwork. We will compensate you for the harm caused by the false termination. That is money. Yes. Money matters. Do not pretend it does not. But if money is where you stop, you are still buying your way out. Julian nodded. Then tell me where to start. Keisha pointed to the waste logs. With the trash. The real trash, not the coated kind. Change the rule that lets managers destroy safe food before offering it to local partners. Pay for small shelters to meet your compliance instead of using compliance to shut them out. Protect employees who report waste. Publish recovery numbers by store, not just the pretty regional totals. And every pharmacy return gets tracked like it belongs to a human being. Not a spreadsheet. Grant said carefully. Some of those changes require board approval and liability review. Keisha looked at him. Then review why liability only gets urgent when poor people touch what rich people waste. No one answered. At noon, the independent auditors confirmed enough preliminary findings for Julian to suspend Heather Collins pending termination review and refer the matter for a broader investigation across the region. Heather requested to speak with him privately. He refused. Not because he hated her, but because privacy had done enough damage. Her attorney asked whether the company would characterize the issue as isolated. Julian said no. The word moved through the room like a door opening. By 1:15, Julian called an emergency board meeting. Keisha did not stay for it. She had to return to the hotel before her supervisor cut her shift. But before leaving, she stopped at the review room door and looked back at the tables. Mr. Blackwell. He turned. Yes. Do not make me the face of your redemption. The sentence found him before he could defend himself. I will not. Do not put my son in a press release. I will not. Do not stand at Brooks House with cameras and call it partnership before the refrigerator is full and the paperwork is fair. I understand. Keisha shook her head. You are starting to. She left with Mrs. Evelyn, the old name tag still on the table. Julian watched it after she was gone. A small rectangle of plastic. A name. A record. A life altered by the kind of lie that looked harmless when filed under policy. That afternoon, as the board members appeared on the conference screen one by one, Julian did not begin with market impact, legal exposure, or communication strategy. He lifted Keisha's name tag and held it where they could see. This belonged to an employee we called a problem because she understood our mission better than we did, he said. Today we are not discussing how to protect the story of Blackwell Fresh. We are discussing whether that story has been true. No one applauded. No one smiled. Good, Julian thought. Applause had always come too easily. The truth deserved a harder room. The first written correction reached Keisha before the money did, and somehow that mattered. At 6:43 the next evening, while she stood in the apartment kitchen cutting one apple into pieces small enough to look like more, her phone buzzed with an email from Blackwell Fresh Holdings. She expected careful language. She expected softened phrases, passive sentences, and apologies shaped to protect the people making them. Instead, the first line made her stop with the knife in her hand. Keisha Monroe was wrongfully terminated after raising valid concerns about safe food recovery, donation classification, and store-level disposal practices at the East Austin location. She read it twice. Then she sat down because her niece had learned not to trust sudden justice. The letter continued. Her employment record had been corrected. The trespass warning had been withdrawn and removed from all internal systems. Her lost wages, lost benefits, and documented medical costs connected to the termination period would be restored through an independent claims process, not a confidentiality agreement. Ray Turner was named as a protected witness in the review. Brooks House would receive immediate refrigeration support, transportation funding, and administrative help to meet compliance without losing independence. Heather Collins had been suspended pending final termination and referral of all relevant conduct to the independent review panel. Keisha did not cry until she reached the sentence that said the company acknowledged that food recovery concerns had been treated as employee misconduct instead of operational warnings. Noah came into the kitchen and saw her sitting still with the apple slices untouched. "Mama!" She wiped her face quickly, then stopped pretending because children know when tears are not the same as defeat. "They wrote it down," she said. "Wrote what down?" "That I did not steal." Noah stood beside her chair. "They should have known that already." Keisha gave a broken little laugh. "Yes, Professor. They should have." 3 days later, Julian Blackwell stood in front of the Blackwell Fresh Board, not at a gala, not beside a donation display, not under flattering lights, but in a plain conference room with auditors, worker representatives, shelter leaders, and a live internal feed open to every store manager in the region. On the table in front of him were Keisha's old name tag, Ray's reports, Mrs. Evelyn's pantry record, and a printed photograph of the East Austin dumpster from the night everything changed. He did not open with a slogan. "We built a company that knew how to describe compassion," he said. "But in too many places, we did not build a system that practiced it when no customers were watching." The room stayed silent. He continued. The new policy was not charity language. It had teeth. Every store would separate safe recoverable food before disposal. Local shelters, churches, food banks, senior centers, and community kitchens would be helped through compliance instead of excluded by it. Store managers would be measured not only by shrink reduction, but by verified safe recovery. No employee could be disciplined for raising a documented food waste concern without independent review. Pharmacy partner returns would require full cold chain tracking before removal from the building. Security reports involving food recovery would go directly to a regional ethics line outside store management. Destroying safe food to prevent recovery would become a terminable violation. A worker and community oversight council would review monthly numbers store by store. One board member asked about cost. Julian looked at him for a long moment. "We have been charging the cost to hungry people because they did not send us invoices." No one asked that question again. Keisha did not attend that board meeting. She refused to become a symbol before the policy became real. Instead, she stood beside Mrs. Evelyn at Brooks House as 2 delivery workers installed a commercial refrigerator in the pantry, silver and humming, with enough shelves to hold real weekend food instead of hope labeled pending. Marcus taped a new temperature log to the door. Noah helped carry empty plastic bins from the hallway, labeling them bread, produce, prepared meals, dairy, medical cold storage, and checked twice. When the first official Blackwell Fresh recovery van arrived that Friday evening, Keisha stood outside with her arms folded, watching every box come down. She checked dates. Mrs. Evelyn checked seals. Marcus checked temperatures. A young store employee named Alana, nervous in a green apron, handed Keisha the manifest and said, "They told us you helped design the old pilot." Keisha looked at the form, then at the girl's worried face. "Do not trust a form more than your own eyes." Alana nodded. "Yes, ma'am. And if something is wrong, Write it down where your manager cannot bury it. The girl nodded again, harder this time. Inside, the pantry shelves filled slowly with bread, apples, rice bowls, milk, sealed soup, and enough fresh vegetables for Mrs. Evelyn to change the weekend menu without writing pending beside dinner. Eli's aunt came by to thank Keisha, but Keisha shook her head and pointed to the refrigerator. Thank the people who will keep it working when I am not here. Julian arrived near the end alone, carrying no cameras, no oversized check, no public relations team. He stood at the pantry door until Mrs. Evelyn noticed him. You lost? She asked. No, ma'am, he said. Just trying not to be in the way. Keisha looked over from the sorting table. Then pick up that clipboard and read temperatures. For a second, everyone waited to see whether a billionaire would understand the instruction. Julian took the clipboard. He read the first number aloud, then the second, then asked Marcus where to initial. Noah watched him from beside the bread shelf, curious. You are the owner, right? Julian looked at him. Yes. Then how come you are doing homework? Julian glanced at Keisha, then back at Noah. Because I was absent for the important lesson. Noah considered that, then handed him a pencil. By Sunday, 8 children at Brooks' house had weekend meals with names written on containers when allergies mattered. By Monday, Keisha received a formal corrected employment record and the first emergency payment without a release attached. By Wednesday, Ray was promoted to Regional Safety and Ethics Liaison, though he told Keisha he still felt like he was just writing down what he should have said louder before. She told him, louder starts now. Heather's name disappeared from the store schedule, but Keisha took no joy in that. Consequences were not revenge. They were proof that policy had finally reached the people who used it. The deepest justice came 2 weeks later, in a small room at the Community Workforce Office, when Keisha filled out an application for a new role created by the Oversight Council, Community Food Recovery Director. Under the question asking whether she had ever been terminated for misconduct, she checked no. Then she paused, took out the corrected letter, and placed it beside the form. For 3 years, a false record had made her explain herself to people who had already decided not to listen. Now the paper told the truth before she had to defend it. She looked at Noah, who was doing homework in the chair beside her, then at the clean line of ink on the application. For the first time in years, her name did not feel like something a company had damaged. Felt like something returned. 1 year later, the alley behind the East Austin store no longer smelled like a secret. The West dumpster was still there, because every grocery store had waste, but it no longer sat locked beside sealed food and unanswered hunger. Beside the loading dock stood a refrigerated recovery bay with clear bins, printed temperature sheets, and a green sign that read, "Safe food is offered before it is wasted." Every evening, a small Blackwell Fresh van drove a route that included Brooks' house, 2 church pantries, a senior building, and a community clinic. It was not perfect. Keisha Monroe did not trust perfect systems, because perfect was often a word people used before they stopped listening. But it was real enough to be measured in dinners served, medicine stored correctly, employees protected, and children who no longer had to wait for hunger to become somebody's public relations opportunity. Keisha now ran Second Harvest Bridge from a modest office inside a renovated community center 2 blocks from Brooks' house. Her name was on the door, not as a symbol but as authority. She trained store employees, shelter volunteers, and drivers on food safety, donation logs, allergy labels, cold chain handling, and the one rule she wrote across the front of every manual: if the person closest to the problem says stop, the system stops long enough to listen. She still wore simple clothes, still tied her braids back, still kept gloves in her tote bag, and still checked expiration dates faster than most scanners. But there was something different in her shoulders now. Not ease. Life had not turned into a movie version of easy. Rent still existed. Cars still broke. Children still needed medicine. But the old false mark was gone from her record. The Nissan had finally been repaired, and Noah's prescriptions no longer required a math problem at the pharmacy counter. Noah was 8 now, taller, louder at home, still thoughtful in public. On Friday afternoons, he helped Mrs. Evelyn label the pantry bins before doing homework at the small table near the new refrigerator. He liked to tell people his mother taught rich stores how not to waste food. Keisha always corrected him. I taught them to listen to what they already claimed to believe. One October evening, Julian Blackwell arrived at Brooks' house without a camera crew, carrying 3 boxes from the recovery van because the driver had called in sick and Keisha had told him leadership did not exempt anybody from lifting what they had once ignored. He had changed too, though not in the easy way men describe after one apology. He was still wealthy, still powerful, still surrounded by people who preferred softer words when hard ones were true. But he visited loading docks now before ribbon cuttings. He asked store workers what numbers did not show. He published recovery data by location, including failures. He let the Oversight Council challenge him in rooms where no one clapped. That evening, after the last bin was checked, Noah handed him a clipboard. "Temperature homework," the boy said. Julian took it. "Yes, sir." Keisha watched from the pantry doorway as the man who once looked down from a glass office now bent over a dented refrigerator, reading numbers carefully because a child had told him to. Mrs. Evelyn came to stand beside her. "You ever think about that first night?" Keisha looked toward the pantry shelf where bread, apples, rice bowls, milk, and labeled medical cold storage now sat in orderly rows. "Every Thursday." "Still hurt?" Keisha nodded. "Some." "Still proud?" Keisha looked at Noah, then at the clean bins waiting for the next delivery. "More." Later, after the van pulled away and Brooke's house settled into the warm noise of children eating dinner, Keisha stepped outside. The air smelled like rain and hot pavement. Across the street, the city glowed with new buildings and old problems, neither one fully defeated by a better policy. Julian came out carrying the empty clipboard. "I found something in the recovery report," he said. Keisha turned. "A problem?" "A small one. A store in Round Rock is underreporting prepared foods." She held out her hand. "Send me the logs." He smiled faintly. "Already did." She nodded, accepting the answer but not relaxing the standard. That was the agreement now. Not trust without proof. Proof repeated until trust had somewhere safe to stand. Before leaving, Julian looked back at the pantry window, where Noah was taping a drawing to the wall. It showed a brown paper bag, a loaf of bread, a medicine box, and many small hands reaching toward a table. At the bottom, in careful child handwriting, he had written, "Do not throw away what someone needs to live." Keisha stood beside her son and read the words silently. What she had saved first that night had not only been insulin. It had been evidence that compassion could survive in the hands of people the world embarrassed, questioned, and pushed behind buildings after closing time. She had saved proof that poor did not mean careless, that tired did not mean broken, and that dignity could stand beside a dumpster and still be cleaner than a polished lie. And the lesson stayed there, taped to the wall at Brooke's house, simple enough for a child to write and strong enough for a billionaire to spend the rest of his life trying to honor. Nothing good becomes worthless just because powerful people decide not to see it.